conclusion, after a thorough review and given the totality of the circumstances and credible evidence in this case, it is my opinion that Officer Vinson acted lawfully when he shot Mr. Scott. He acted lawfully. I am fully satisfied and entirely convinced that Officer Vinson's use of deadly force was lawful. The central issue here is whether Officer Vinson was lawful in using deadly force against Mr. Scott. Anyone is justified in using deadly force if he reasonably believed, and in fact believed, that he or someone else was in imminent danger of great bodily injury or death. We cannot know what Mr. Scott's intentions or reasoning were that day, and Officer Vinson could not know that at the time. What he saw was a man who had drawn a gun when confronted by police, exited a vehicle with a gun in hand, and failed to comply with officers who commanded him at least 10 times to put the gun down. When considering imminent threat, it's important to consider the science of response time and reaction time. The reality is that Mr. Scott could have raised his gun and killed Officer Vinson or another officer before any of them could have reacted to the threat. Reaction time studies dealing with the police shootings provide valuable insight for the analysis of this shooting, and these studies are cited in the report. Those studies show that in these scenarios, the result is a tie at best. Even officers in a position of ready, watching somebody, if they're armed with a gun to their side, by the time they do this, the reaction from officers has to be from the brain to the trigger finger, and the studies say it is tie at best. When considering, I think there's a misconception out there about the scope of the review in the DA's office. This office does not examine whether an officer followed CMPD directives or policies or whether the incident was handled appropriately from a tactical standpoint. In this case, the only determination this office is making is whether or not Officer Vinson acted in self-defense. Now I'd like to speak to the community.